An NHL insider reveals a huge trade is coming as Philadelphia Flyers forward has been linked to multiple teams around the NHL. In this video, we're going to talk about what he brings to a contending team and what Flyers fans can expect in return. So you're not going to want to miss this episode of Hat-Trick HQ. But before we get into all that, we got to say that 89% of you guys watching this video right now aren't subscribed to the channel. So if you want to stay up on the latest NHL trade rumors, updates, everything surrounding the NHL, especially heading into the Four Nations face-off, make sure down below and hit that subscribe button. With Mark, we got to dive right into this. This is some big news coming out of Anthony DeMarco of Daily Faceoff today, saying, sounds like trade talks are heating up around Flyers center Scott Laughton, and the teams that have been linked to him are the Leafs and the Jets. It kind of seems like they're around every trade at this point, Mark, but we're going to dive into Scott Laughton. In case you haven't heard of this guy's been a great center around the league. I mean, he's been consistently getting around 30 to 40 points over the last 3 seasons. He is 30 years old. He's 48% on the faceoff dot right now, and if we just take a look at his chart here from Daily Faceoff, obviously you can see he leans more into his physical game. We've seen him getting a few scraps in his days in the NHL as well, so he's a guy who's going to bring that fight to a team and bring some goal scoring at times. He's on 10 goals this season, so he can definitely bring that goal scoring edge with him as well. Right now on a $3 million contract hit. Mark, before we dive into the Jets and Leafs side of this, what do you think Scott Laughton brings to one of these contending teams?
I mean, looking at Scott Laughton, he looks like the ideal third line center and a guy that can step up into the second line center in a pinch. Laughton doesn't only bring physicality, the fact of putting up 40 points, scoring you 10 to 20 goals each season. Scott Laughton is also incredible on the penalty kill. You can put him in the net, in front of the net, sorry, not in the net, in front of the net on the power play. Scott Laughton brings everything you need out of physical forward going into a playoff push. If a team is looking for that perfect third line center to put on their team to make the full push, to make a push for the Stanley Cup, Scott Laughton, in my opinion, is one of the best, if not the best option. At $3 million, Scott Laughton is an absolute steal of a contract. We're seeing a lot of teams, especially the Leafs, and we'll touch on that for a second, but with the Leafs, they've been linked to a lot of players. I mean, Braden Schen's a guy that's making over $6.5 million. So getting someone at half that price to help them not only this season, we know it's a 2-year deal, so this will be this year and next year, only 30 years old. I think a lot of teams are going to be pursuing him. I mean, we see it with 2 contenders in the Leafs and the Jets, and I do think the price is going to be a premium, but I think it could be the deciding factor of making that full push. I'm not going to say Scott Laughton's going to go out and score you 50 points in the playoffs, but he's going to go out and do everything you need out of a forward.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this is a guy who, in a 7-game playoff series, is going to get under opponent's skin. He's going to beat guys up. He's going to pound people into the boards because that's the type of player he is. But he can also go out there and score you a goal. He can go out there and set up a scoring chance because that's what Scott Laughton is like. And leading into the Leafs side of this here, Mark, I mean, we did talk about the Leafs being involved in a number of centers where we could maybe see Tavares shift to the third line center. But in this trade here, I think if Brad Living says, hey, we want to keep Tavares on that second line and we want to bring in a bottom 6 third pairing center, Scott Laughton is that guy, and at a very cheaper cap hit than what you're going to get at any of these other guys. And I think this would be a great trade for Toronto because, you know, he's not going to be a guy who, like you said, is going to go out there and light it up in the playoffs or anything. He could. The goal scoring is there for him, but he's a guy who's going to win you faceoffs at times of need. He can go out there on the penalty kill as well. He's a good defensive forward as well. So I think what he brings to a team like the Leafs is that physicality to where nights where you don't want to have Reeves in the lineup, Laughton is going to be there to pick up for these guys, definitely in a 7-game series.
And I mean, looking at the Leafs, listen, I love Pontus Holmberg. We've seen him dominate in the SHL. He's looked good in stints in the NHL, but I don't think he is the third line center if you're pushing for a Stanley Cup. If David Kampf moves off this team, yes, slide him to the third line center or fourth. That would be perfect. But the biggest problem that's been with Toronto for a couple of years, obviously the core four not fully producing, but I think this came with the lack of bottom 6 production. Looking at this, there are a lot of names in the bottom 6 that can produce for you. Nick Robertson's finally having a bit of a bounce back here and actually staying healthy. The fourth line has been physical, but they haven't been putting up many points. I think you need to really make a new identity on this third line with someone like Scott Laughton. He could come in, play the penalty kill, hop into the second power play unit. He can still join this team, produce on the third line. You can pop him up to the top six if you really wanted to, or in a pinch if you wanted to spread lines out. Try Nylander at center, whatever it might be. The Leafs truly need to fix this third line. Not saying that it's a terrible third line, because it's not. But looking at center depth, if you had Matthews, Tavares, and Scott Laughton as your three centers down the middle, that's hard to compete against. That's up there with the best, or maybe even the best center depth in the entire NHL. Casey, I don't know if you feel the same way, but I do feel like Scott Laughton would be the perfect pick for the Leafs. I know the first round pick that the Flyers do want in return, the Leafs don't have this year. So maybe Brad Treliving looks at something like Nick Robertson plus a prospect to bring this guy in.
Yeah, I mean, he's not the biggest name like a Ryan O'Reilly or anything like that, but this guy could be the missing piece that the Toronto Maple Leafs need going into the playoffs. And like you said, you can get this guy in for a low cost, whether it's a second, third round pick, whether it's a low end prospect, whatever Philadelphia wants, whether it's draft capital, whether it's a prospect. The Leafs do have that available at this point in time, so they can go out and make this trade work, no doubt about it. And the way I look at it, Mark, is you're getting a better David Kampf for about $1 million more here. I think that's, that's the perfect deal here for Toronto. Rather than going out getting a guy that's $6 million, you're cutting that in half and getting a guy who's gonna help protect those guys like a Bobby McMahon and a Nick Robertson, maybe a bit smaller, but they are the more offensively gifted people. But he can also go out and make plays happen for those guys as well. But we are switching to the Jets here because the Jets are the other team linked, and as you see here, their center depth isn't as good as the Toronto Maple Leafs per se, but this is a guy who could come in and maybe make a case for even taking that second line center. I mean, he is playing, I believe, second or top pairing for this Philadelphia Flyers team right now, or first or second line for this Philadelphia Flyers team right now. So, Mark, looking at this Jets lineup, do you think he comes in, takes Nemestikov's job right off the bat, or do you think he maybe slots into the third line like he would in Toronto?
I mean, looking at this, Jets fans do want another center back. I believe Adam Lowry is still out right now. I can't really see with the screenshot, but I don't think he is a part of the lineup at the moment. So once he returns, it would be nice to maybe see him hop straight into the center. The big thing with Scott Laughton, you can still play him on the wing. And the biggest thing around the National Hockey League, you can't have too many centers. If you have an entire full lineup of centers, you have someone to at least take the drop. If you have all wingers, you kind of get stuck in a bad situation. So I do think Scott Laughton would fit there. I mean, we've seen a lot of reports. They do have a lot of UFAs and RFAs at the end of the year. So getting in a guy on a cheap cap hit of only $3 million does help out. We've seen them linked to someone like Brock Besser from the Vancouver Canucks, which is going to cost a lot more. I mean, Brock right now, I think, is making $6.5 million. He's a UFA at the end of the year. They would have to extend him for about $8 million a season. So if they want to go a cheaper route, pick up a guy that helps once again, not only right now, but next year when they continue to can. I mean, Connor Hellebuck isn't going to get much younger, so you want to continue to compete. Not saying that's a bad thing, because he's still been incredible and a Vezina candidate and probably going to win the Vezina again this year. But looking at this, you want to go all in with this team. We've seen them sign some contracts, 2 long-term. Scheifele's one of them. Hellebuck's another. They believe in this core. They want to push with this core. I do think Scott Laughton, once again, is the perfect piece for any contending team. And I actually really like his fit on the Jets.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like you said, the analysis you just said was perfect. The Jets have a lot of expiring guys, so why go out and bring in another expiring guy? I mean, Laughton's already got another year left on his deal. You don't got to go worry about signing him again after this season. So maybe you bring him in and he helps you, look kind of like we said, the Leafs brings that physical edge and helps protect some of these young guys by also making plays happen. Like, they have Perfetti and Niederreiter, guys who've been playing good this year. So you bring in a guy like Scott Laughton to center either one of those lines, it could definitely make them have a better push towards finally getting out of this first round for the NHL Jet for the Winnipeg Jets this season. But I think I like this trade for both teams here, and obviously it is sad for Philadelphia Flyers fans to see a guy like Scott Laughton go because obviously he has been a career Philadelphia Flyer for this team, and you don't want to see a guy like that go, but if it gets you some capital in return that you can help with this rebuild, you definitely have to go do it. We want to hear your guys' thoughts down below. Where do you think Scott Laughton fits the best? Is it in Toronto or is it in Winnipeg? Let us know down below. But if you enjoyed this video, make sure to go down below, leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel. We'd really appreciate it. But as always, I've been your host, Casey, alongside my co-host, Mark Pye. We'll catch you in the next one.